Good morning, Kids for Jesus and church family. Last week we learned about John the Baptist and how humble he was. This week, as we carry on learning, we discover a verse in the book of James, chapter 4, verse 6, in the Bible that says, "But he, God, gives us more grace." That is why Scripture says, "God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." So if you are humble, you receive grace from God. Wow! God gives us the gift of grace. Isn't that amazing? But hang on. What exactly is grace? Well, I think the best explanation of grace is that grace from God is like getting a gift that you don't deserve. Let me explain. This week I was looking at Facebook and I saw a picture on the group called Great Heroes of an elderly man and a bicycle and a young boy who was crying. What happened is the young boy decided to take his bicycle out for a ride, but his bicycle had no brakes, and suddenly he saw a car and he tried very desperately to stop, but he couldn't, and bang, he hit the elderly gentleman's car. Now what this picture was of the elderly gentleman giving a brand new bicycle with working brakes to the young boy. And the young boy is crying because he's completely overwhelmed because he doesn't feel like he deserves this gift. He damaged the elderly man's car. Why would this man give him a gift? He thought what he deserved was to be punished. But the elderly man was more worried about the young boy's safety than he was about his car. And that is what grace is, a gift that you don't deserve, but you get anyway, because there is someone who cares about you. If we turn to the Old Testament of the Bible, we will find a story there that can help us understand grace a little better. And that is the story of Mephibosheth. Now, this guy, with quite a tongue twister of the name, is the son of Jonathan. This is the picture of Jonathan we're going to use for our activity in the parent guide. He is the grandson of King Saul. But what you also need to know is that Jonathan was best friends with David. You might remember David. That's the little guy. David and Goliath and his 5 smooth stones. They were best friends. But David and King Saul had quite the history together. But after that has passed and David has become King David, he tries to track down any living family of his best friend Jonathan. And they managed to track down Mephibosheth. Now Mephibosheth was only 5 years old when his nurse heard that his father and grandfather had been killed. So she tried to escape. She picked him up and ran with him, and as they were running, they fell. And Mephibosheth unfortunately became disabled, and he wasn't able to use his feet properly anymore. So he struggled for many years in a land that wasn't where he was born. And then suddenly he gets this invitation from the king. Mephibosheth goes to the palace. In the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 9, verses 6 to 7, it says, "When Mephibosheth came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, 'Mephibosheth, your servant,' he replied. 'Don't be afraid,' David said to him, 'for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table.'" Wow. You will always eat at my table? He was telling Mephibosheth that he was welcome as part of his own family. But Mephibosheth answered, bowing low, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" As the grandson of the previous king, a king who actually tried to kill David, Mephibosheth never expected an invitation like this. He would have been completely overwhelmed. He was disabled. He couldn't contribute in any way. He knew he didn't deserve this gift that David was extending to him. He knew that he could never earn it, he could never work for it, and there was nothing that he could do to repay the king. And that is what grace is. Grace is a gift that is undeserved, a gift that you cannot work for. Only the king could give Mephibosheth a gift like that. And that is exactly the same as us. Only our king can give us a gift of grace, like David gave to Mephibosheth. Our king, God, invites us into his family, tells us that we can sit at his table, one of his children, because he loves us. No strings attached. There is nothing that we can do to earn love like that. There is nothing that we can do to deserve it. We make bad choices. We are not perfect like our God is perfect. So how could we ever do anything to deserve a gift like that? It is grace. The verse ends, so Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. We are one of our king's sons and daughters, and he is a God of grace. So we are children of grace. Now, last week, our butterfly friend learned that his beautiful wings were not to glorify himself, but were to glorify God. And the same way, our grace towards others glorifies God. But that means that we also need to love our enemies and people who are different to us. Now, hang on. Things just got a little bit shaky. How do I love my enemies? And sometimes I struggle with people who are different from me. But Jesus gives us very important advice in the book of Galatians, chapter 5, verse 14. It says, "For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. One command. Love your neighbor as yourself." If we can be humble and show grace, if we can love without expecting anything in return, we can get so many things right if we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. But if you are struggling with this idea because you don't even really fully understand what grace is, so you don't know how to give grace, here's a tip. Grace can look a lot like kindness. So if you need a place to start, then a very good place to start is kindness.